challenging the death penalty.
The American Civil Liberties Union wrapping up its final argument to end the death penalty in Kansas today. Keith Grant in the newsroom with those details. Keith?
Mike and Rachel, the ACLU first attempted to abolish the death penalty here in Kansas in 2023, but that effort failed. This latest is in Wyandotte County. The ACLU argues that the death penalty is unconstitutional in Kansas. This recent attempt started back in October with testimony from historians and legal experts. The ACLU's testimony attempted to connect the state's history of racism and the state's use of the death penalty. The ACLU used research from a professor that studied cases in Wyandotte County.
When the victim is white, the prosecution was far more likely to seek the death penalty here in Wyandotte County. And when the defendant was black, the case was far more likely to proceed to a capital trial.
Now, Kansas hasn't executed a prisoner since 1965, but there are 9 inmates on death row right now. Gallup polling shows that support for the death penalty nationwide has been eroding. In the 80s and 90s, 80% supported execution. Back in October, Gallup found support was down to 53%. Rachel?
Keith, thank you.